My name is Aiden, and at 28, I woke up to find my mother sorting through my lingerie drawer while my father was copying my bank statements in the living room. They had made copies of my keys without permission. This was the 15th break-in in 3 months. That night, I made a decision that would make them lose their minds. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever dealt with boundary-crossing family members, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible real-life stories. Trust me, what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. My parents had always been overly controlling, but I thought moving out would finally give me the freedom I craved. When I got my first apartment at 24, I was so excited. My own space, my own rules, my own life. But my mother's first words weren't congratulations. They were a demand. "We need spare keys for emergencies," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Being young and still seeking their approval, I handed them over without a second thought. At first, the violations were small enough that I could almost convince myself I was imagining things. I'd come home to find my furniture slightly rearranged. "Your couch looked better against the other wall," my mother would say when I asked. Then belongings started disappearing. My favorite band t-shirts, gifts from friends she didn't approve of, even books she deemed inappropriate for a young lady. When I confronted them, they'd gaslight me. "You must have misplaced them, dear. You've always been so forgetful." The escalation was gradual but relentless. One evening, I came home early from work with a migraine and found my mother sitting on my bed, reading my diary. Not just skimming, but taking notes. When I screamed at her to get out, she had the audacity to cry and say she was just worried about me. "You've been so distant lately. I needed to know if you were okay." The next week, I discovered my father had been going through my computer history while I was at work. He'd printed out pages of my browsing data and confronted me about dating sites I'd visited. That's when I found the cameras. Small, discreet ones hidden in my living room and kitchen. My parents had installed them without my knowledge, without my consent. They were literally watching my every move. When I demanded they remove them, they acted like I was the unreasonable one. "If you have nothing to hide, why do you mind?" my father asked, his voice dripping with false concern. "We just want to make sure you're safe." Every attempt at confrontation was met with masterful manipulation. They'd cry, claiming I was breaking their hearts by wanting privacy. My mother once threatened to harm herself if I changed the locks. "Is this how you repay us for raising you?" "By shutting us out," she sobbed, clutching her chest dramatically. The guilt was suffocating. I felt like the worst daughter in the world for simply wanting to live my own life. It wasn't until my sister Brooklyn visited that I learned I wasn't alone in this nightmare. At 32, she looked exhausted, worn down. Over wine, she revealed our parents had done the exact same thing to her. "It destroyed my marriage," she admitted, her voice hollow. "Mark couldn't handle them constantly showing up, going through our things, interfering in every decision. He said it was like being married to 3 people instead of 1. She'd tried to warn me years ago, but I was too young, too hopeful that things would be different for me. The real shock came when I discovered the extent of their deception. During a family gathering, my cousin pulled me aside. "Are you really having those mental health issues your parents mentioned?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I was confused until she explained. My parents had been telling everyone in the family that I was mentally unstable, that my desire for privacy was actually paranoia, a symptom of some unnamed disorder. They were laying the groundwork to justify their invasions, painting themselves as concerned parents caring for a troubled child. The final straw in this phase was discovering they'd been intercepting my mail and packages. Important documents, birthday cards from friends, online orders, everything went through them first. They had befriended my mailman, convincing him to deliver everything to their house first for safety reasons. When I confronted the postal service, they were horrified and immediately corrected the situation, but the damage was done. I realized my parents saw me not as an adult daughter, but as a possession they had unlimited access to. The incident that finally shattered my last reserves of patience happened on a Thursday evening. I came home to find my apartment ransacked, drawers pulled out, closets emptied. At first, I thought I'd been robbed, but then I saw my mother's note. "Cleaned out some old junk for you. You'll thank me later." The old junk included my grandmother's heirloom jewelry, pieces she'd left specifically to me before she passed. When I called my mother, hysterical, she casually mentioned she'd donated them to charity because they looked tarnished. Those irreplaceable pieces of family history, gone forever because my mother decided they weren't shiny enough. My relationship with Jake had been strained for months because of my parents' constant interference. He was patient, understanding, but everyone has limits. They would call him at all hours, demanding to know his intentions with their daughter. They showed up at his workplace, grilling his coworkers about his character. They even hired someone to follow him, convinced he was cheating because he didn't answer their calls during a work meeting. The final straw came when they contacted his ex-girlfriend, looking for dirt. Jake sat me down, tears in his eyes. "I love you, Aiden, but I can't do this anymore. It's like dating the CIA. I feel monitored, judged, and stalked every single day." I begged him to stay, promised things would change, but we both knew I'd made those promises before. The workplace incident nearly destroyed my career. I'd been working toward a promotion for 2 years, putting in extra hours, taking on additional responsibilities. My boss had all but confirmed I was getting it. Then my parents showed up at the office, demanding to speak with her. They told her I was too fragile for additional responsibility, that the stress might trigger a breakdown. They painted a picture of a woman on the edge, someone who needed constant supervision. My boss, confused and concerned, called me in. It took hours of explanation and showing her evidence of my parents' lies to salvage the situation. The promotion was put on hold pending further evaluation. The violations of my medical privacy were perhaps the most disturbing. I discovered my mother had been calling my doctor's office, pretending to be me to get information about my appointments and prescriptions. She'd somehow gotten my social security number and personal details to pass their security questions. When I started seeing a therapist to deal with the stress, my mother called and canceled my appointments, claiming I'd decided I didn't need help. She told the therapist I was seeking attention and wasting their time with made-up problems. Financial manipulation added another layer to their control. I noticed discrepancies in my car insurance payments and discovered my father had changed my policy without my knowledge, opting for cheaper coverage and pocketing the difference. He'd been doing this for years, stealing hundreds of dollars while putting me at risk with inadequate coverage. When confronted, he claimed he was managing my finances because I was too irresponsible to do it myself. The hidden recording devices were the ultimate violation. After finding the cameras, I thought I'd secured my space, but during a deep clean, I discovered tiny recording devices in my bedroom and bathroom. The thought of them potentially listening to my most private moments made me physically ill. When I confronted them with the devices, they denied everything, then pivoted to saying they needed to make sure I wasn't doing drugs or bringing home dangerous men. The gaslighting was so intense I started doubting my own sanity. The spare key situation spiraled when my parents gave copies to my Aunt Ruth, the family gossip. She started letting herself in whenever she pleased, often when I wasn't home. I'd return to find her going through my closets, checking my refrigerator, examining my medicine cabinet. She'd report back to my parents about everything from my food choices to my birth control pills. The violation was multiplied, my privacy breached by committee. The emotional breakdown came after a particularly invasive incident. I'd been photographing items to sell online, including some boudoir photos I'd had taken for Jake before our breakup. They were tasteful, artistic, but private. I found my father going through them on my laptop, copying them to a USB drive. When I screamed at him, he said he needed to make sure I wasn't doing pornography. The shame, rage, and violation I felt in that moment broke something inside me. I collapsed on my bathroom floor, sobbing uncontrollably, realizing this would never stop. They would never see me as an adult deserving of privacy and respect. That night, curled up in my bathtub because it was the only room with a lock, I made my decision. I had to escape, and I had to do it in a way that would shock them into realizing their actions had consequences. Planning my escape required the kind of strategic thinking I'd never needed before. I knew my parents tracked everything: my credit cards, bank accounts, even my social media. Every purchase was scrutinized, every movement monitored. I had to become someone else entirely, someone clever enough to outmaneuver the people who'd been controlling me since birth. The first step was finding a new apartment far enough away that casual drop-ins would be impossible. I settled on a city 3 hours away, close enough to keep my job with remote work arrangements but far enough to create a real barrier. The challenge was monumental. How do you apartment hunt when your parents track your gas purchases and question every mile on your car? I started taking hiking trips on weekends, telling them I'd joined a nature group for mental health. In reality, I was driving to my chosen city, viewing apartments, meeting landlords. The lying felt wrong, but the alternative was remaining a prisoner in my own life. My best friend Mia became my lifeline. Understanding my situation, she let me use her credit card for application fees and her address for correspondence. We developed an elaborate system where she'd photograph any mail and send it through an encrypted app my parents couldn't access. Moving important documents without raising suspicion required patience and cunning. Each week, I'd take a few items to work in my purse: birth certificate, passport, tax documents, treasured photos. My desk drawer became a temporary safe. From there, I transported everything to a safety deposit box at a bank my parents didn't know about, paid for with cash I'd carefully saved from grocery purchases. Every receipt had to be doctored, every story straight. I became an expert at deception by necessity. The challenge intensified as moving day approached. My parents, perhaps sensing a shift in my energy, increased their invasions. They started showing up multiple times a day, sometimes just sitting in my apartment while I was at work, waiting for me to come home. My mother reorganized my closets twice in 1 week, claiming she was helping me declutter. Close calls became frequent. Once, she almost found the folder of apartment applications I'd hidden inside a cereal box. Another time, my father questioned why I had boxes in my car, forcing me to quickly lie about donating old clothes. Setting up mail forwarding was another obstacle. The postal service required identification and confirmation, things that would create a paper trail. Again, Mia came through, adding me as an authorized resident at her address temporarily. Every detail had to be perfect, every potential leak sealed. I gradually moved my most precious possessions to a storage unit across town, paid for in cash, under Mia's name. Family photos, jewelry that survived my mother's purge, gifts from real friends, anything irreplaceable went into that small, secure space. Finding the perfect new apartment felt like destiny. It was in a doorman building with security cameras, key fob entry, and a strict visitor policy. The landlord, a woman named Janet, had escaped an abusive relationship and understood the need for security. When I explained my situation, she went above and beyond, registering my apartment under a corporate name and ensuring all building staff knew never to give out information about residents. The relief I felt signing that lease was indescribable. Psychological preparation proved just as crucial as logistics. I had to prepare for the guilt, the anger, the potential explosion when my parents discovered what I'd done. Through online forums for adult children of narcissistic parents, I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and offered video sessions. Dr. Williams helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't normal parental concern but pathological control. She helped me write scripts for potential confrontations and develop coping strategies for the guilt I'd inevitably feel. The financial untangling was complex. I opened new bank accounts at a completely different bank chain, opted for paperless everything, and slowly transferred my money in small amounts that wouldn't trigger questions. I got a new credit card sent to Mia's address, giving me a financial tool my parents couldn't monitor. Each step toward independence felt both thrilling and terrifying. Years of conditioning told me I was betraying them, but Dr. Williams reminded me that expecting basic privacy wasn't a betrayal. Creating alibis for moving day required theatrical skill. I invented an elaborate company retreat, complete with fake emails and an itinerary I left visible on my kitchen counter. I even packed a suitcase with resort wear, knowing they'd check. The movers were scheduled to arrive 1 hour after my supposed departure time. Everything had to look normal until the very last moment. The night before, I barely slept. Not from excitement or fear, but from a strange mixture of both. I was about to break free from a prison I'd been born into. The morning couldn't come fast enough. D-Day arrived with the kind of crisp morning clarity that felt like the universe approving my decision. I'd hired professional movers known for their speed and discretion, paying extra for their quick exit service designed for people leaving difficult situations. They promised to have my apartment empty within 3 hours. As I performed my morning routine for the last time in that violated space, every action felt momentous. This shower, this coffee, this glance out the window, all were endings and beginnings simultaneously. The diversion tactic worked perfectly. I called my parents as I supposedly left for the retreat, my suitcase visible in the back seat as I video chatted with them briefly. My mother reminded me to eat properly and my father told me not to talk to strangers, as if I were 12 instead of 28. I forced myself to smile, to sound excited about the fictional retreat, all while my heart hammered against my ribs. The moment I ended the call, I doubled back to my apartment where the moving crew was already waiting. Watching my life get packed into boxes was surreal. The movers were incredibly efficient, wrapping and loading with practiced precision. 2 of them had dealt with similar situations and offered quiet words of encouragement. As my furniture disappeared into the truck, the apartment began to look like what it had always been under my parents' control, an empty shell, a stage for their invasions rather than a home. The locksmith arrived as scheduled, changing every lock and installing additional deadbolts that even the landlord's master key couldn't open, at least temporarily. Leaving for the last time was harder than expected. Despite everything, this had been my first adult home, the place where I'd tried so hard to establish independence. As I closed the door, I left an envelope for my landlord Stan explaining everything, knowing my parents would harass him. Inside was a month's extra rent for his trouble and evidence of their harassment in case he needed to involve police. Stan had been like a grandfather to me, and I hated leaving him to deal with the aftermath, but I'd learned you can't save everyone when you're drowning. The first discovery came exactly when I'd predicted, Sunday evening, when they would typically drop by to inspect my weekend activities. I wasn't there to see it, but Brooklyn was, hidden in her car across the street with binoculars like some sort of spy movie. She texted me play-by-play updates. First came confusion as their keys didn't work. Then my father's aggressive knocking, followed by my mother's shrieking demands for the landlord. Stan, bless him, took his sweet time responding, claiming he'd been napping. Their panic was immediate and absolute when he confirmed I'd moved out 2 days prior. My phone exploded with notifications. 40 missed calls in the first hour, each voicemail more hysterical than the last. Text messages ranged from concerned to furious to pleading. Where are you? This isn't funny. How could you do this to us? We're calling the police. You're breaking your mother's heart. Answer us now. I'd turned off read receipts and location sharing, so they were screaming into a void. The silence from my end was its own response, one they'd never expected from their compliant daughter. The police involvement came quickly. Brooklyn reported they'd stormed into the station demanding an immediate search for their missing daughter. The desk sergeant, apparently used to such scenarios, calmly explained that an adult choosing to relocate without informing family wasn't a police matter. They tried claiming I was mentally unstable, even producing some forged documents suggesting I was under their conservatorship. The officers saw through it immediately, especially when they couldn't produce any actual court orders. They were warned about filing false reports and sent away. The attempt to break down my old apartment door came next. Stan called me, laughing despite the situation. My parents had returned with my uncle's tools, trying to claim they had a right to enter. Stan threatened to call the police and produced the letter I'd left explaining the situation. My father's face, Stan reported, went from red to purple to white as he read my words. My mother collapsed dramatically in the hallway, wailing about ungrateful children. Other tenants began complaining, and Stan finally did call the police, who issued a trespassing warning. The Flying Monkey Brigade activated within hours. My phone became unusable from the barrage of calls and texts from aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. Your parents are worried sick. This is so unlike you. Whatever the problem is, we can work it out. Your mother is having chest pains. The last one almost got me until Brooklyn texted that she'd seen our mother doing jumping jacks in her garage an hour after the supposed heart episode. The family gossip network was in overdrive, each relative adding their own dramatic flair to the story. Social media became a battleground. My mother posted increasingly dramatic statuses about her missing daughter, complete with old photos of us in happier times. The comments ranged from supportive to suspicious. Some relatives bought the narrative completely, offering prayers and sharing the posts. Others, particularly younger cousins who understood toxic family dynamics, remained notably silent. I watched it all unfold from my new apartment, feeling like I was observing someone else's life from a safe distance. The most satisfying moment came when my parents tried to access my apartment after hours. Stan had installed new security cameras after their first attempt, and the footage was comedy gold. They showed up at 2 a.m. with flashlights and what looked like lock-picking tools. My father spent 30 minutes trying to pick the new locks while my mother stood watch. When that failed, they tried the windows, setting off the new alarm system I'd paid to have installed. The police response was swift, and this time, they were arrested for attempted breaking and entering. Stan sent me the security footage, and I saved it in multiple locations, evidence for the restraining order I was already planning. The private investigator appeared within a week. My new building's security alerted me to a man asking questions about recent move-ins, showing my photo to doormen at various buildings in the area. My parents had clearly spent serious money on a professional, which showed just how far they were willing to go to maintain control. The PI was good, methodical, checking utility connections and new service registrations. But I'd been prepared for this, having put everything in Mia's name initially, planning to transfer later once the heat died down. The workplace drama erupted on a Tuesday morning. I was in a video conference when my boss Sandra messaged me privately, "Your parents are here with someone they claim is their lawyer. Can you come to my office?" My blood ran cold, but I'd prepared for this too. I'd already disclosed the situation to Sandra and HR, providing documentation of the harassment. Walking into that office to face my parents for the first time since my escape was surreal. They looked older, haggard, but their eyes still held that familiar possessive gleam. Their lawyer was actually just a family friend with no legal authority, a detail that became clear quickly. The scene they caused was spectacular in its desperation. My mother sobbed about her missing daughter while my father demanded my new address, claiming they had a right to know where I lived. When Sandra calmly stated I was an adult employee whose personal information was confidential, they pivoted to accusations. I was clearly being held against my will, they claimed. This company was probably a cult. Someone was controlling me. The security guards were called when my father lunged across the desk, trying to grab my arm. The entire office watched as my parents were escorted out, my mother screaming that they'd sue everyone. HR's response was more supportive than I dared hope. They'd dealt with stalking situations before and took it seriously. Security protocols were updated with my parents' photos distributed to all guards. A panic button was installed at my desk. They even offered to relocate me to another office if needed. When I broke down crying in gratitude, Sandra revealed her own story of escaping an abusive family. "The company stands by employees facing harassment," she said firmly. "Family or not, what they're doing is abuse." The social media war intensified when Aunt Ruth accidentally revealed the truth. In her eagerness to paint me as troubled, she posted about all the times she'd checked on me using the spare key. She detailed finding birth control, wine bottles, and questionable books, not realizing she was admitting to criminal trespass. The comments exploded. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out, appalled. Some shared their own stories of Ruth's invasive behavior. The narrative my parents had carefully crafted began crumbling. Brooklyn's stand marked a turning point. She'd been quietly supportive but publicly neutral, afraid of becoming their next target. But seeing them at my workplace, witnessing their complete disconnect from reality, something in her snapped. She posted a lengthy statement on Facebook detailing years of abuse, control, and manipulation. She confirmed everything I'd said and added her own experiences. The post went viral within our extended family. Suddenly, cousins were sharing their own stories of our parents' boundary violations, loans never repaid, family events ruined by their need for control. The legal threats came next, delivered by an actual lawyer this time. They were suing me for emotional distress, claiming I'd abandoned them maliciously. They wanted damages for their pain and suffering and a court order requiring me to provide my address. My own lawyer, recommended by Sandra, laughed when he read it. They're basically asking the court to enable stalking, he explained. He filed a countersuit for harassment, identity theft, and invasion of privacy. The evidence I'd collected, including the security footage of their break-in attempt, made their position untenable. The private investigator drama took an unexpected turn when he reached out to me directly. He discovered the truth about my parents through his investigation, realizing he was enabling harassment rather than locating a genuinely missing person. He offered to testify on my behalf and provided all the information he'd gathered, including recordings of my parents explicitly asking him to find ways to access my new home without my knowledge. His crisis of conscience became my strongest weapon. The fake medical emergency was their most desperate play yet. I received a call from a hospital claiming my father had suffered a heart attack and was asking for me. The voice sounded official, the caller ID showed the hospital's number. For a moment, my resolve wavered. But something felt off. I called Brooklyn, who lived closer to the hospital. She drove there immediately and found nothing. No admission, no record of my father being there. Further investigation revealed they'd used a spoofing app to fake the hospital's number and hired someone to make the call. Dennis's defection was unexpected but welcome. My cousin had always seemed firmly in my parents' camp, but when they asked him to help break into my storage unit, he finally saw them clearly. He came to me with recordings of their plans, including discussions about having me declared mentally incompetent. He revealed they'd done similar things to other family members over the years, always stopping just short of completely destroying relationships. He'd kept quiet out of fear but couldn't watch them destroy me. The coalition building happened organically. As Brooklyn's post spread and more relatives shared their experiences, we discovered a pattern spanning decades. My parents had systematically violated boundaries, stolen money, and destroyed relationships throughout the extended family. A secret Facebook group formed where victims could share stories and evidence. The group grew to over 30 members, including some surprises like my mother's own sister, who revealed why she'd moved across the country 20 years ago. The family meeting explosion was inevitable. My grandmother, my father's mother, called for a family gathering to sort this mess out. I didn't attend, but Brooklyn did, armed with printed evidence and testimonies from the Facebook group. The meeting descended into chaos when my parents realized the extent of the opposition. Physical violence erupted when my father shoved Brooklyn after she presented evidence of their financial crimes. My uncle intervened, and the police were called. Both parents were arrested for assault, their mugshots later circulating through the family WhatsApp with a mixture of shock and vindication. Their final desperate move showed just how far they'd fallen. They created elaborate fake social media profiles pretending to be me, posting about being kidnapped and held against my will. They included photos taken from my old computer, trying to make it seem current. But their lack of tech savvy showed immediately. The metadata on the photos showed they were years old, the language didn't sound like me, and they made basic mistakes about my life. Friends reported the profiles immediately, and social media platforms banned them for impersonation. It was pathetic, watching them flail so desperately, but I felt no sympathy. They'd created this situation with years of abuse disguised as love. The restraining order documentation became my full-time job outside of work. Every text, email, voicemail, and third-party contact was meticulously catalogued. My lawyer advised me to be thorough but warned it would be emotionally draining. He was right. Reading through years of manipulation, seeing the patterns laid out in black and white, was like performing surgery on my own psyche. But with each piece of evidence added, I felt my case growing stronger and my resolve hardening into diamond. The identity theft discovery came through a routine credit check. I'd been monitoring my credit carefully since escape day, knowing they had access to my personal information. The first fraudulent card appeared a month after I left, opened in my name but shipped to their address. Then another, and another. They'd been strategic, spacing them out to avoid immediate detection. The total damage exceeded $15,000 in available credit, all cards maxed out within days of opening. The purchases were revealing: hotel stays in my city, rental cars, electronic surveillance equipment, and payments to various investigation services. Working with my lawyer and a financial crimes detective proved therapeutic in unexpected ways. Detective Morrison had seen this before: adult children forced to prosecute parents for financial abuse. She was professional but kind, validating my experience when I struggled with guilt. "Love doesn't include theft," she said simply. "Parents who truly love their children don't steal their identities." The criminal case built quickly with their sloppy paper trail. They'd used their home computer to apply for the cards, their IP address linking every fraudulent application. My parents' employer outreach backfired spectacularly. They'd crafted a letter to my company's CEO, claiming I was mentally unstable and needed intervention. They included forged medical documents and their twisted version of events. What they didn't know was that our CEO, Patricia Hendricks, was a vocal advocate for mental health awareness and domestic abuse survivors. She forwarded their letter directly to legal and HR, viewing it as evidence of harassment. The company's response was a cease and desist letter that made their lawyer pale when he read it to them. Boss Sandra evolved from supervisor to fierce protector. Having survived her own toxic family, she recognized the patterns and provided guidance beyond professional obligations. She adjusted my schedule for court appearances, connected me with the company's employee assistance program, and even offered her guest room when I worried about my security. "Chosen family is real family," she said during one particularly difficult day. Her support exemplified how workplace relationships could transcend professional boundaries in meaningful ways. The unexpected alliance with Dennis deepened as he revealed more family secrets. Our parents had a history of targeting relatives during vulnerable moments. When our aunt was going through a divorce, they'd offered support while secretly documenting her emotional state to use against her in custody hearings. When our cousin started a business, they'd sabotaged supplier relationships while pretending to help. The pattern was consistent: offer support, gather intelligence, then use it for control or destruction. Dennis provided documentation going back 15 years, a treasure trove of evidence showing systematic abuse. Building the victim coalition required delicate navigation of family politics. Some relatives remained neutral, too afraid of becoming targets themselves. Others were angry about past incidents but hesitant to take action. I became an unwitting leader, organizing video calls where we shared stories and strategies. The group evolved from complaint sessions to action planning. We coordinated legal strategies, shared lawyer recommendations, and provided emotional support. Discovering I wasn't alone, that dozens of family members had suffered similarly, transformed my guilt into righteous anger. The parents' reputation crumbled publicly at Brooklyn's neighborhood barbecue. She'd invited mutual acquaintances and family friends, people who'd known our parents for decades. After a few drinks, stories began flowing. The neighbor revealed how my parents had called CPS on her for letting her kids play outside unsupervised. The family friend shared how they'd tried to break up his marriage by lying about seeing his wife with another man. Each story added another crack to their carefully maintained image of concerned parents. By evening's end, their social circle had shrunk dramatically. The confrontation at Brooklyn's house was their last attempt at direct contact. They showed up unannounced during her daughter's birthday party, causing a scene that traumatized children and infuriated parents. My mother grabbed Brooklyn's arm, leaving bruises, while demanding to know my location. My father shoved Brooklyn's husband when he intervened. The other parents quickly shepherded children inside while someone called police. The arrest happened in full view of the neighborhood, my mother screaming about ungrateful daughters while being handcuffed. The incident finally gave Brooklyn the evidence needed for her own restraining order. Police involvement escalated beyond simple trespassing warnings. The pattern of harassment across multiple jurisdictions caught the attention of a detective specializing in stalking cases. She connected incidents in my old city, my new city, and Brooklyn's town, building a comprehensive case. The detective was particularly interested in the electronic surveillance equipment purchases and the identity theft. This goes beyond family drama, she explained. This is organized harassment crossing state lines. The federal implications made my parents' lawyer strongly encourage them to accept a plea deal. Their final desperate move before legal consequences hit was attempting to access my medical records at every hospital and clinic in both cities. They'd pose as me, claiming to need copies for insurance purposes. Most facilities caught the deception immediately due to HIPAA protocols, but a few smaller clinics nearly fell for it. One receptionist called me directly to verify, inadvertently alerting me to their latest scheme. This violation felt particularly invasive, knowing they were trying to weaponize my health information against me. Each attempt was reported to authorities, adding to their mounting legal troubles. The lawyer's letter announcing their surrender came on a Thursday afternoon. Faced with criminal charges for identity theft, harassment, stalking, and assault, plus civil suits from multiple family members, they were finally accepting defeat. The letter was manipulative to the end, painting them as victims of ungrateful children who'd misunderstood their love. But buried in the legal language were the important parts. They'd agree to no contact, would pay restitution for the identity theft, and would accept plea deals avoiding jail time in exchange for probation and mandatory therapy. It wasn't justice exactly, but it was freedom. 6 months after my midnight escape, I barely recognized the person staring back from my bathroom mirror. The constant tension that had lived in my shoulders for years had finally released. I could breathe deeply without checking for hidden cameras. My hands no longer shook when my phone rang. The hypervigilance that had been my constant companion was slowly fading, replaced by something I'd never experienced before: peace. My new therapist, Dr. Chen, called it post-traumatic growth, the positive psychological changes that can follow trauma when properly processed. The therapy journey revealed depths of damage I hadn't fully understood. Unpacking 28 years of control, manipulation, and gaslighting required patience I didn't know I possessed. Some sessions left me exhausted, others empowered. Learning terms like enmeshment, emotional incest, and narcissistic abuse gave language to experiences I'd never been able to articulate. Understanding that my parents' behavior stemmed from their own untreated traumas helped reduce guilt without excusing their actions. Explanation isn't justification, Dr. Chen reminded me repeatedly. My promotion at work came through 3 months after the drama, Sandra advocating fiercely on my behalf. The leadership team was impressed by how I'd handled the crisis while maintaining performance. The new role came with a substantial raise, which I celebrated by taking myself to dinner at a restaurant my parents would have deemed too expensive. Sitting alone at that table, ordering wine without worrying about judgment, felt like a profound act of rebellion and self-love. Financial independence tasted better than any meal. The relationship with Marcus developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and clear boundaries. We'd met at a bookstore, bonding over shared interests in science fiction. When I eventually shared my story, he listened without trying to fix or minimize. His own family was healthily boring, as he put it, with parents who respected privacy and celebrated independence. Watching him interact with his family taught me what normal looked like. They had keys to his apartment for genuine emergencies only, and they'd never used them. The concept seemed revolutionary. Brooklyn's parallel journey toward healing strengthened our sister bond. We instituted weekly video calls, processing our shared trauma and celebrating small victories. Her therapy was helping her recognize how our parents' behavior had influenced her parenting style. She was determined to break the cycle with her own daughter, teaching her about bodily autonomy and healthy boundaries from an early age. Watching my niece grow up free from the suffocating control we'd experienced filled me with hope for future generations. The legal resolution brought financial restitution, but more importantly, enforced distance. The restraining orders held firm, and the probation requirements meant my parents faced real consequences for any contact attempts. They were required to attend therapy, though reports from family suggested they spent sessions blaming everyone else for their circumstances. Still, their inability to harass us directly provided the space needed for genuine healing. The identity theft restitution helped establish my emergency fund, money that ironically provided security against them. Building my chosen family became a conscious effort. Friendships deepened when I could finally be honest about my past. Colleagues became genuine friends when I stopped maintaining the facade of normal family relationships. My building's doorman, Tony, became a grandfather figure, always greeting me warmly and taking pride in maintaining security. The elderly woman next door, Mrs. Chen, invited me for tea weekly, sharing wisdom about surviving difficult families. These relationships, chosen rather than imposed, carried a different weight than blood ties. My parents' letter through their lawyer arrived 8 months after escape. Written as part of their therapy requirements, it was a masterclass in missing the point. They apologized for loving too much and caring too deeply. They claimed confusion about boundaries, painting their crimes as misunderstandings. The manipulation was evident in every line, seeking to rewrite history even now. Dr. Chen and I spent a session analyzing it, finding dark humor in their inability to take genuine responsibility. My response was silence, the most powerful statement I could make. Reflection on the journey revealed strength I'd never known existed within me. The young woman who'd handed over apartment keys to controlling parents had evolved into someone who could enforce boundaries, pursue legal action against family, and build an independent life. The guilt that had initially consumed me transformed into pride. I'd chosen myself, my safety, my sanity over maintaining a toxic dynamic. That choice, made in desperation on a bathroom floor, had led to genuine freedom. The ending isn't perfectly neat because real life rarely is. Some family relationships remain strained, others completely severed. Holidays are complicated, spent with chosen family rather than blood relatives. But the peace that comes with authentic living outweighs any lingering sadness. My apartment is genuinely mine now, a space where no one enters without permission. My life choices are my own, from career moves to relationship decisions. The simple act of changing my hair without commentary feels revolutionary. At 28, I learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself from drowning is to stop trying to rescue those who keep pulling you under. My parents may never understand why I left, but that's no longer my burden to carry. Their love came with terms and conditions that no child should have to meet. Real love doesn't require surveillance. Real love doesn't steal identities or break down doors. Real love lets go when children become adults. Real love celebrates independence rather than sabotaging it. I'm finally free. If you've experienced similar family boundary violations, please share your story in the comments below. How did you find the strength to break free? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories of survival and triumph over toxic family dynamics. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that escape is possible, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, and that real family respects boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect, not control. Until next time, stay strong and trust your instincts.